You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Well, good evening my fellow history and haunting enthusiasts, and welcome to another fact-filled show of Haunted Histories. I'm truly going all out for you guys to provide a wide variety of locations for you on this programme, and tonight is definitely no exception. This week we're going to be venturing down under, and we're going to be talking with Bill Tabone of the Australian Paranormal Society about the both majestic and slightly intimidating Aradale Mental Hospital. Before I start talking history, you know, the bit you really enjoy, I hope you all enjoyed last week's show on the Manson family and the Aman house with my guests Emily Kirkpatrick and Tammy Gayamavi of Three Girls in the Dark and Lost Souls Investigations respectively. If you haven't popped to Facebook to give their pages a like, you're missing out, as not only are both these girls incredibly funny, they are also incredibly hard-working and constantly have new ventures on the go. Tammy, for example, has just finished a documentary on demonic possession. If you haven't had chance as yet to listen to last week's show, worry ye not! It's still available on Spreaker and YouTube for your delight and delectation. Go on, download it. You know you want to. You'll also hear me absolutely losing it laughing over the connection between Taco Bell and demonic voices on a digital recorder. It was a good job it was a pre-recorded interview is all I can say, as live I may have had problems regaining my composure to act like the sensible and mature host that I am. No comments needed, thank you. Well, we've got some cracking shows coming up on Haunted Histories for the rest of the year, so go and check them out on the Parasearch events page. But if there is any way you'd like me to examine and talk about the haunted links, let me know. I don't bite. Well, only if you ask nicely and it's a full moon. I'd also love to hear about any of the places we mention if you've visited them yourselves and have had experiences there. If you don't want me to mention you by name, just say so. But if you do, feel free to get a shout out on the radio show. As I think I said in last week or the week before, my husband will be doing his first ever investigation in a few weeks, and at the moment I'm taking bets as to how long he lasts before he is clinging on to me like a scared toddler. Saying that, I think he will really enjoy himself, even if he does leave with maybe the odd grey hair poking through. So tonight, what do we have in store? Well, we're travelling all the way to Victoria, Australia. Yes, all the way down under, to a place called Ararat. To give you a brief outline of Ararat, it's named after a nearby hill called, funnily enough, Mount Ararat, and was basically built upon gold, specifically the gold rush of the late 1850s, which turned this sleepy small town into a booming hive of commerce. A major gold seam was found and worked by Chinese gold miners, and led to a significant part being played by the Chinese in the formation of Ararat's history and development. As with most booming towns, and mining towns especially, places where people could be buried and also places where people who had broken the law was required. Ararat, no exception. And the local graveyard, I almost find this amusing actually, was next door to the old jail. The closeness in proximity, supposedly to make those thinking about committing a crime to reconsider their decisions, as the ground was what may await them. In October 1867, Ararat Lunatic Asylum opened on the site of an old graveyard. Don't worry though, the graves were all exhumed and moved to another site prior to the hospital being opened. It is true, however, that in the mid-1880s, when the gold ran out, the prison, which was originally known as Goldfields Prison, was acquired by the Lunacy Department and turned into temporary housing for the criminally insane, a place where the most depraved and possibly dangerous men in Victoria were housed in the highest security. It became known as J-Wing, a parody on the fact it had previously been a jail. Now you may think, how bad could it have been? Well, your flatmates would not really have been someone you would probably have wanted to invite round for coffee. That's a given. Anyone in J Ward was a convicted murderer, accused of murder, too violent to be in a normal prison, or sentenced in another part of Victoria and becoming insane whilst in conventional prison. It was also quite easy to be sent to J Ward. All it needed was the signatures of 2 doctors, and that was it. You were there. We're going to talk to Bill a bit later about J Ward and some of the spirits associated there, but you have to keep in mind that this whole complex of Aradale, and including J-Wing, was basically a self-sufficient town in its own right, comprising of more than 60 different buildings and housing over 1,000 patients and inmates, depending on what you wanted to describe the residents of J Ward, I suppose, as having been, and nearly half as many staff. The only outside intervention was probably in said staffing and probably the filling of beds. Let's take Bill Wallace as an example. He spent 57 years in J Ward and then 7 years at Aradale, leaving in 1989 on his death at 107. He was actually never tried or convicted, but was believed to have murdered a friend in Melbourne over an argument about said friend smoking in the cafe they were sitting in. He was declared insane by 2 doctors in 1925 and held at the governor's pleasure for the next 64 years. There were a few executions at Ararat in J-Wing, although not a large number, and these men were buried in the grounds of Ararat Asylum, just outside the main grounds in fact, left in the standing position in unconsecrated ground, facing the walls in the belief that this would stop their spirits being able to leave their final place of imprisonment. Interestingly, something not dissimilar used to be done to witches. They were buried with their heads facing down, so that if they came back to life, they would find themselves digging their way to hell rather than back to the world that had executed them. Ain't superstition a wonderful, wonderful thing? It was also not uncommon, as it was both in the UK and the US, for people in these kind of places to be suffering with nothing more than perhaps epilepsy, or even having been born with developmental disorders such as Down syndrome. Women even suffering from postnatal depression would be taken there, sometimes by nasty husbands, who, as long as they could get the required 2 signatures, could get rid of a petulant wife. And then they would have a life of compromise of being left in their cells, with incontinent and mentally incapacitated patients left naked and expected to relieve themselves wherever in their cells, with it being hosed down at the end of the day. Experimental surgical operations conducted without anaesthesia and in the full hearing of fellow patients who were waiting their turn, and even worse, were sometimes able to watch procedures such as lobotomies and electric shock therapy being conducted. There were day pens where patients were placed every day for fresh air, but without any shelter from the hot Australian sun or the cold weather and the risk of hypothermia. Not to even mention the rapes and abortion chairs, which got regular use, unfortunately. Don't forget as well, it was virtually impossible to leave. Only 2 signatures to get in, one of which in the husband and wife case could have been your husband, but at least 7 to 8 to get out. It's no surprise that a lot of people died at Aradale, and that it had its own mortuary, which was poorly run and often overloaded. In the medical community's defence, mental health care was still very, very much in its infancy, and even now, compared to other branches of medicine, is still a young area. And things like lobotomies and electroconvulsive therapy is still being used, albeit with a better understanding of the outcome. The youngest person to be lobotomised at Aradale was meant to have been 12. 12, for heaven's sake! But you only have to listen to our show earlier this year on St Catherine's Mental Health Facility in Doncaster, UK, to be specific, to hear the parallels with treatment of mental health, to see that this kind of experimentation, total breach of human dignity, was nothing that wasn't happening in other countries. But saying that, it may still have been better than being dead in the gutter, although how much, I'm not really sure. It was in 1884 that the Zox report was published, and this was particularly scathing of Victoria's care of the mentally ill, especially of Aradale, still known as Ararat Lunatic Asylum at this time. When Ararat Lunatic Asylum was renamed in 1959, after, would you believe, a local competition for an applicable name was settled upon Aradale, and for the next 34 years that's what it was known as. It started shutting in 1991, with the change on mental health care becoming more focused on care in the community, as opposed to residential type facilities. Full closure being in early 2001. Part of the site eventually became taken over by Melbourne Polytechnic as part of their campus. The population of nearby Ararat more than halved, which showed how much of a business and main employer the hospital was. In fact, it's just had its 150th anniversary of the first patients being moved in, which was on the October the 19th, 1867. Anyone would think I'd planned this, wouldn't they? What I find absolutely intriguing, though, is the fact that there are still many residents of Ararat who would have worked at Aradale, but don't want to talk about it. Whether they remember barbaric treatments, or whether they're still haunted by the spirits of former patients, who knows? But finding actual accounts of life there, even in the last 50 years, is very hard. And when you watch the videos on YouTube that talk to the guides and people who show people around there now, because it is a museum, they will say the same thing. People who work there don't want to talk about it. Shall we chat to Bill now? And you really don't want to know how much coffee it had taken me to stay awake to record that interview following this. I'm talking to someone in Australia, remember? And now I'm joined by the lovely Bill from the Australian Paranormal Society. Hi Bill, thanks for joining us.
Hey Penny, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. We're going to be talking about, well, Ararat Lunatic Asylum, Aradale Mental Hospital, which is wherever you want to name it, sort of, so that people know where it is. But
Aradale,
Aradale, Ararat, you know, whichever.
Yep.
But before we start, APS is big in Australia. You've been around how many years now?
Wow, we've probably been around about 12 years now. Wow. As a group. Australian Paranormal Society. We've been set up for quite a number of years now, and we get out there and do our thing. So it's we tend to try to network quite widely. So we're worldwide, and we deal with and work with other groups all across the globe, which is fantastic.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you start investigating as a person yourself?
I have been interested in the paranormal since I can't even remember when it happened. It was since I was a little child. I've always been fascinated in all things that went bump in the night. Mm-hmm. Everything from ghosts to UFOs. I would read everything I could get my hands on, watch everything I could get in front of me, and really I conducted I suppose I did my first investigation when I was about 19,
right.
Of an old cemetery, and so that was I'm 50 now, so that's 31 years. It's and feeling every year of it. No, but that was probably my first investigation that I would, my first official investigation, if you want to call it that, and been going since then. So
wow.
Sometimes busier, sometimes not so busy.
Sure. So out of all the places in 31 years you've investigated, you can have three. What are your favourites? Which do you love going back to?
There are so many, but obviously Aradale is big one which we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
But Aradale is just great. The second would be Gettysburg in the US. That was fantastic. I experienced so much there, and it's just being a bit of a history stuff. I really enjoyed that as well, and so the American Civil War is a big interest of mine.
Right.
And the third one, it's too hard to choose. There's so many. Let's say there's actually a great. We have a quarantine station down here in Melbourne,
right.
Which has a fort attached to it, and that would have to be probably second one because we've had a lot of experiences down there. So they're probably, if I've got to pick three off the top of my head, they're the three. So
and what was that a quarantine station for? That you say was a fort?
For immigrants. Yeah, the quarantine station. There's the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. There's actually a fort on each sort of a point where the ships have to come through.
Right.
Fort Lonsdale, Fort Nepean, and but the quarantine station was for immigrants. And such where they would come in and be, if there was yellow fever or there was something they needed to be quarantined for, they would be sent there. It's quite a large area with I think it had about 6. They call them hospitals, so multi-story buildings, decontamination units, doctor surgery. It was also used as a military base at one stage and a training base for the military. The forts themselves were actually the first. They fired the first shots in World War One, trying to stop a German ship leaving the harbour. And World War Two actually, both World War One and World War Two. The first shots, Australian shots, were fired from those forts.
Wow.
So it has quite a history. I mean, it's just one of those places that are absolutely beautiful because it's right on the water. And same with Aradale. They're during the day so beautiful, but as soon as it goes dark, the atmosphere changes. So you tend to start feeling very different when the sun goes down.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Australia, you're sort of obviously you've got your indigenous population the same as say America has.
Yes.
But then from a history, your history is around the same period in length of time as somewhere like America. So you're both quite young countries.
Yeah, America's
very similar in that
for sure
respect.
Yes.
Do you? I mean, one of the sort of the jokes I get from people I know Australian will say, "We don't want your convicts anymore. You can keep them to yourself now." Are there any sort of hauntings associated with some of the more nefarious people that we sent across from the UK?
With convicts and such? For sure. I mean, there's prisons.
Right.
There's prisons here we can get into that Old Melbourne Jail, Old Geelong Jail, Pentridge, all ranging from early to mid 18th century.
Right.
And I've been to all of them, and I've captured evidence in all of them, and some of them are not so nice people, whether they're haunting the place, but the stories they tell tend to lean that way because they're not very nice people.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman, for example, that was in the Old Melbourne Jail. He's executed there. His name was Frederick Deeming.
Mm-hmm.
He killed his wife and children in the UK because he met someone else who wanted to be with them. So he killed his wife and children, buried them under the hearth or heath or whatever it's called. And come to Australia. Now he met with this woman, so they had children. They lived just down here in Richmond or South, Richmond, and he did the same thing. He killed her and the children, put them underneath the fireplace, and then went to Western Australia where he was going with another lady when he was arrested and brought back to Melbourne, tried, put in the jail. Now the thing with him is he was actually thought to be he was a suspect in the Jack the Ripper case.
Really?
And in America, they actually was newspapers saying that they had caught Jack the Ripper. So when they actually captured him. Now, I've been in his cell, and it's in the jail. Now, I haven't experienced anything as such, but it is really a nasty feeling in there, the cell they kept him in. So, that's. I mean, there's so many of these convicts. Some from Australia, I mean, some from the UK, some from America. Yeah. In these places, and you just, you can tell their energy is still around, whether it's their spirit, but their energy or their imprint is still there.
Their negativeness,
definitely, definitely. The imprint of how they felt, how they acted, is definitely on location.
So, are there any places you've investigated that you just wanted to get the hell out of there? You just, it's
for sure.
either too ominous, or something's happened to you that's made you go, I ain't doing this no more. I'm off.
People. Being an investigator, I always see some television shows or things where these investigators, they go into these places to try to catch evidence, and as soon as something happens, they freak out and run, screaming. That to me is totally contrary to what we're trying to do.
It's also rude to the spirits that have answered your question, done something, and then you go running away. They're like, what the hell am I doing this for? Yeah.
How do they not stay and be possessed? No, I'm sorry. But I mean, the thing is, for us, I work a lot and try to instill in my guys, fear control. So you get scared. I mean, anyone that says that they haven't been scared when they've been doing this for a long time and been in some nasty places, or feel fear of some sort, you need to have a certain control on your physical reactions, and so we're there to gather evidence, and we're there to try, to investigate these places. So yes, we've been scared. Yeah, I have been scared, but there's really only been one place that, I mean, look, I've experienced everything. I mean, I've been, as I've been scratched. I've been actually bitten. I've had a lot of things happen to me from a spirit, but it's not all bad. It's been good, as well. But there's only one place, and it was an old bunker, World War II bunker, where down here on the peninsula somewhere. It's actually hidden away. Not many people know about it. It's really well hidden. And they perform. There's people have been in there and they've performed black magic and rituals and things like that. I went there just as not even an investigation, just as to have a bit of a look with one of my team who knew about it. And it was probably the most horrible place I've ever been. And for me, I really felt uncomfortable, and I really just wanted to get out of there. So that was the worst. Yeah, that was the most horrific place I've been.
And do you think that's because of the World War II link, or do you think whoever's done the black magic down there had brought something in?
I think it's more to do with what's been brought in there, whether it was there at the time, but we were hearing things that, well, there's one way in and one way out of this place. Right. There's bush all around it, really thick tea tree scrub, which I'm not sure whether you have it there.
No, we don't.
It's really thick. You can't walk through it. Right. But there was people walking around outside that weren't there. It was, and it wasn't that so much because I've experienced all that. It was just the feeling of dread that just came over us.
The feeling of intent that was there.
Yeah, it was a really horrible. And anyway, we left. We went up to the car on the road. My friend lit a cigarette. Was having a cigarette. We're having a chat, and on where we were parked, it was a gravel road. There was white gravel. We drove back to his place, about 15 minutes away, his house, pulled in the driveway, and he's a big lad. He's 6'4", and he gets hit in the back of the head with this stone, right, in the car. So it wasn't outside and someone's throwing it. We were in the car, and we found this stone, and it's actually one of the white stones from where we were. And they're not around his place, so I don't know where it came from. So.
Did he have a hood on or anything it could have got caught in?
No. Oh, we went through all that. We went. No, it was nothing. It was a warm night. We just had t-shirts on, but this was actually thrown. Actually hit him. Right. And it's so we don't know what it was, and really don't have any interest in going back, to be honest. Right.
I mean, most of my experiences in military, and because military is one of my favourite sort of history topics, I suppose you could say, and it's a standing joke with friends of mine. Any military facility I go to, I get hit on by one of the ghosts. Not hit on as in punched, but hit on as in chatted up or something. Yes. But I don't know why the boys in uniform seem to like talking to me.
That's good.
But I never get a feeling of dread in any of them. I never get a feeling of sort of. I get a busy feeling. I get a hectic feeling. I get a we're here to do a job feeling. I can't think of a more succinct way of putting it. So that feeling of sort of dread and sort of less than positive, shall we say, intent. Sure. It sounds like it's something that's been brought into the place rather than was there from what it was used for.
For sure. No, I agree with, and that was my thoughts exactly. It wasn't to do with anything that was there. The funny thing is this bunker is actually it's in a really strange position as well, because it's not really in a location where it's going to be viewing the coastline or anything like that. It's a really strange setup. But I agree with you 100%. I don't believe it was anything that was associated with the building itself. I think it was something that was brought in by what was being done there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the purpose of this bunker was, because it's not in a logical place for it's not invasions or anything like that.
No, it's a very strange location for it, and we've actually haven't been able to find a great deal on the location or why it's there. So whether it was, my only thoughts was possibly that it was a training bunker.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. On military experimentation or something was done on the land, and that was there as an observation point, so to speak.
It could be any one of those things. And there's at the fort, at the fort that I was talking about, there's actually a part of it that was you actually. It's about a 4-kilometre walk from the quarantine station up there, but you can catch a bus. But at night, obviously, there's no bus. There's actually a hospital jail thing sort of halfway up, which was actually at one stage covered in sand. It was filled because there's big sand dunes around there.
Yeah.
And that place is really sort of dark as well. So you never know what went on. That was very similar, close to this bunker. So you never know what sort of things went on there. There's strange training or experiments or something. So that's that's all. Obviously would have been classified or whatever, but it makes a great story.
It does, doesn't it? I'll tell you what, let's take a quick 30-second break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about Aradale and the experiences there. So everyone listening, don't go anywhere. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Okay, we're back. We're still joined by Bill Tabone of Australian Paranormal Society, and we've just been chatting about some of his experiences over the last 31 years of different paranormal and unexplainable, whatever the word would be, stuff. But we're going to talk now about Aradale, the mental hospital that's in Victoria, which is the state, or I don't know what you'd call it in Australia. Is it the state, the same state as Melbourne?
Melbourne is. Melbourne's the capital city. Victoria's the state. Yeah, definitely. Okay. And Aradale's in Ararat, which is a couple of hours drive away from Melbourne.
Okay.
Most people have heard of Ballarat, which was I suppose considered the centre of the gold rush at the moment. Right. There's a big reenactment village there about the gold settlements and things, and it's probably about another 80 k's past that.
Okay.
So great. It's a lovely, lovely part of the world.
It's really hard for me in the UK. I get the same thing when I talk to people in the US, to think you could be in the same state, but you're still sort of 2-3 hours drive away. Because here in the UK, you drive for 2 or 3 hours, you're in the next county. And it's quite a sort of the whole size thing. I have quite a sort of trying to picture it. I find quite hard.
I can understand.
Yeah.
definitely.
But Aradale itself as a building, obviously it's been there since
Yep.
1867 was when it was first opened
Yeah,
as an
yeah,
institution.
1860. Yeah, 1860s it was started. 1860 they started building it. About 1865 it opened. 1865,
Right.
1867. So it's been there quite a long time. It was at the biggest mental institution in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And you've seen the photos. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
quite a grand old building.
It's a
Or buildings.
beautiful building, but it's a very weird style, isn't it? It almost looks like an army barracks. With all
It does.
all the 60 odd different buildings that are almost like attached
Yes.
to it. It does look like
Yep,
you've got your main building and then your army barracks.
That's what's very similar. Yeah, exactly. I actually never thought of it like that, but it's very it's structured. Buildings themselves, when you look at the outside, they look very structured. When you enter the buildings, they actually are a maze. I always say to people when I take them in there, don't wander off, because especially when it's dark, you won't find your way back.
Was that done on purpose to stop the inmates being able to escape?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it's to keep them, so they can't, it's not, you haven't got a straight corridor where people can run havoc straight down, things like that. But there was different sections. So some sections were for the I suppose the more dangerous inmates.
Mm-hmm.
Some were just for the your standard normal inmates, for want of a better word, normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's but it's a grand old building, and really is you wander through it. You could take I've seen the gentleman that runs the tours there do a 6-hour tour, and people haven't seen everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's that big. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it had a massive number of people living there when it was operational, over 1,000 inmates,
definitely. I mean,
patients, whatever you want to call it, with around 400 to 500 staff having to look after those patients. So it was obviously a massive scale.
Exactly. There's a staff quarter there which is huge, which is 3 stories high. It's massive,
right?
And that's for the staff. So doctors, nurses, etc.
I mean, one of the things I found very interesting doing the research on it was the fact that it was self-sufficient. It was Aradale was a kind of, or Ararat as it was originally known, and I talked in my first half about the change in name and everything. But it was kind of a town in its own right, wasn't it? You didn't need to go outside of it to, it had its own, almost like it's a farm. It had its own mortuary. It had its own, it had everything. Yeah,
definitely. They had they had their farmers, so they had the veggies cupboard. They had their own bakery, and they would bake round. The loaves would be round rather than square, so they could tell that they were from Aradale.
Yeah.
Because there was a tendency for staff to knock them off or steal them, and if they found them in people's homes that were around, they knew they came from Aradale.
Okay, that's interesting.
There was little things, you know what I mean? Completely self-sufficient in most cases. And the kitchens there, the kitchens are huge. And there's still massive vats, to cook in there. You can see where, these machines. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But I think the whole thing, I mean, we'll get on to some of the spooky stories in a second, but, in reading about it, the whole self-sufficiency thing, the fact that, as well, it was almost impossible to get out of that place once you'd been admitted, whether you were in the J ward, the one for the criminally insane, or whether you're in the conventional part of the hospital, for want of a different term. But the fact it was also self-sufficient, it must have felt like a prison. The fact you didn't need to leave.
In a lot of sense, I think it might have. But being so big, there's so much room in there. And people see it now that a lot of the walls are down, especially on the inside of the horseshoe building. So the main building is actually a horseshoe. Right. There was walls dividing the male and female areas.
Right.
So then I would think it would have felt a lot more like a prison.
Yeah.
J ward itself. For the criminally insane, it's actually a separate building in town, so it's a separate, well away from where Aradale is.
Right.
In itself, it's very similar to an old jail.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was the original jail, wasn't it? They took it over
exactly.
for the when the gold
For
the gold died off, so to speak, and they didn't need a prison anymore, but they needed somewhere that could deal with.
Exactly. So it has that prison sense more than Aradale, so it's very I suppose it would have felt very much like a prison in that sense once those other walls were up. And if you come there, you can actually see when you walk out through the admin area, we take our tours out, and we do show them where the walls were, so you can actually see that there was these walls, 12-foot, 15-foot high walls that would have divided the male and female areas. So
I think as well for those, because of the fact that everyone in there wasn't necessarily mentally ill. Some people in there were epileptics, for example. Some people would have been women who had postnatal depression, whose husbands didn't want them around anymore, and would sign them over to go in there. And there's, I mean, when I did a show on St Catherine's Asylum, which is up in Doncaster in North York, in the northeast of the country, and also one of my best friends is, well, her and her husband are both mental health nurses. And ironically, they live on the site of what was one of the biggest asylums in the southeast in the UK, which is, I always find quite funny that they live there. And we've had conversations about this, that she used to have people she had to go and see who'd been put into the asylum literally for being argumentative when they were teenagers, which you could do. You could, if you got the signatures, you could be put into an asylum, and they went mad as a result. And when the whole care in the community thing came, same as in Australia. In the UK, these people couldn't function. They were expected to, but they couldn't because they'd kind of gone mad by association. And
exactly.
So I just wonder if those people who'd been put in there who weren't actually mentally ill, it must have felt very.
It would have been horrendous. The thing is, you could get put in with 2 signatures in Aradale or in our institutions. It took 7 signatures to get you out.
Yeah.
So 2 in, a husband and a doctor. But then 7 to get you out is a big ask. You could get locked up. Well, a woman could get locked up for hanging washing out on a Sunday. That's how bad it is.
Well, apparently one of the laws in the UK was your husband could actually get you locked up because you read too much. And you were too intelligent.
Exactly.
And
that's
me buggered. I would have probably been put away. I never stopped reading and arguing,
being argumentative and things like that. I mean, Mandy always says she would have been in jail because she likes to have discussions.
I understand it. I probably would have been the same. In fact, my husband does sometimes sort of wish for bygone days, as he puts it.
It would have been. It was so terrible. Like, I mean, for being, as you said, epileptic, for Down syndrome, for being a homosexual, for whatever, you could get locked up. And it would have been horrendous. It would have been so frightening.
Yeah.
And as I said, to be able to get out, you needed so many more signatures, so many more people to approve.
You were never going to get it. It was never going to happen.
It was very rare.
Talking about, you saying J Ward is slightly apart from the main Aradale building. Is it within walking distance?
Oh, you could walk there. It's probably half an hour walk.
Oh, right, okay. So let's start with J Ward, because that's one that I found an awful lot of things about, and there's meant to be a few people who sort of are still there.
I know I haven't done a lot at J Ward. I've been investigated and such, but most of my work is at Aradale. So I'll answer what I can.
Okay. The thing is about J Ward, obviously, it would have had the nastiest of the nasty, as well as people who probably maybe shouldn't have been there, because I mean there was a chap by the name of Bill Wallace, wasn't there? He was the oldest person to die. I think he died. He was 106 or 107, something. I think amazing like that. And he'd been in prison there in 1925.
He didn't die in J Ward, but he actually
died in Aradale, didn't he? He was moved across to Aradale. Yeah.
The funny thing is, they with Bill, and actually, apparently he was this little old man, and someone. The story I've only heard recently was someone, when he was very, very old, someone tried to take a piece of food off his plate, so he stabbed them with a fork. So he was still, even after all that time, he still had that. Whether it was because of the environment or whether it was because of his own conditions.
It could have been 6 or 1/2 dozen of the other, really, couldn't it?
Exactly.
Protective of your own food.
exactly. He still had that aggression. You know what I mean? That tendency. So yeah, sorry.
But the interesting thing about Bill was he was never tried. He was actually deemed to be insane, even though he was never tried. He was never formally tried for this supposed murder of someone in 1925, a friend of his who had asked him to stop smoking because he didn't like smoking.
Yes.
He's meant to linger around the place, isn't he? He's meant to. Now, have you encountered him at all at Aradale?
No, I haven't. No, not Bill himself. There's if you see Aradale, if you're there, you'll there's so much energy.
Right.
Residual energy. I believe there's intelligent entities around, both good and not so nice.
Okay.
Just through the experiences that we've had. We have. You'll talk about other. I'm sure other characters there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill personally, no.
Okay.
I don't believe we have encountered him. So.
One of the accounts I read though, and it was yourself. You'd been scratched. You got
Definitely,
scratched on the back. Tell us about that.
Okay, we've had. There's a lot of physical things that happen in Aradale.
Okay.
I've heard of people breaking down crying. That happened on one of our tours just recently. We actually used to spend weekends in there. So we go in on a Friday, we'd sleep for Friday night, Saturday night, and we'd investigate. It's great. We would investigate basically constantly. So, and what happened was we were in doing one of our investigations, and I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't even realize I'd been scratched till I come out, and I have my hair very, very short, as you've probably seen in photos.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out in the morning, and someone said to me, "Oh, look at the back of your head," and I had three. It says two in Richard's book, but actually three big scratches straight down the back of my head, and quite deep, and but again, I didn't even feel them, so which was really strange.
Okay.
But that's not unusual. When I was in Gettysburg in the orphanage down in the basement, that's another story you can look up. People,
Okay.
I was actually
for another day, yeah.
That's fun for another day. But I was actually bitten on the lower leg, and I have photos of these teeth marks on my leg, which is really strange because again I didn't feel it till I went back to the hotel room, took the sock off, and I could see this bite mark. So it's really strange. But no, I didn't feel it. But yes, I was scratched. I was scratched really badly on the back of the head.
And do you know where you'd been before at the asylum?
At that point,
which bit?
Definitely. We were in the bottom floor of the men's ward.
The men's ward.
Men's ward is actually 2 stories.
Okay.
In the bottom floor, personally, there is something quite nasty down in there, and there's myself and one other investigator. It really doesn't like very much,
Okay.
and when we're actually, it doesn't happen so much when we have tours in there, but when we're more on our own, it tends to act up, and we get it actually becomes quite ominous in and threatening in the feeling in the air. Now, I've seen a lot of things happen. I've had equipment go nuts in there, break, a bunch of different things. And we were actually working in that area that night, or the night before, when I was scratched. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and is this other investigator who doesn't like, are they male or female?
Oh, male. It's a gentleman works for me. His name's Lionel. He's fine.
Okay. So it's all right with the spirit's all right with women, but doesn't seem to like men so much.
Not so much. It's more, and it's not even men in general. It's more that this spirit doesn't like the two of us, because we've had other investigators in there that have been fine. I'm not sure why, but it does happen. Obviously, like in everyday life, people take a dislike to people, for some reason that this actually, this thing has taken dislike, and I think that's the one that scratched me. But that same area there, and we can talk now or later if you want to talk about it. But in that same area, we actually had a doppelganger try to lure this other gentleman, Lionel, into the building on his own.
Okay,
so,
tell us about that.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. What happened was we were the building itself, or the main building, is a horseshoe, as I said. But in the middle of this courtyard, there's a massive hall.
Mm-hmm.
Where the kitchen's attached to, doctors, recreation area, and things like that. It's a building in the middle. We were actually on the other side of this building. Amanda, myself, and the other investigators, and a few people we had with us that we were talking to, having a break. And Lionel was on the other side of the building, facing the men's ward, having a cigarette. And he's a big lad, but when he come to me, he was pale, like he knew where we were, but he saw Amanda over sort of sticking her head out from around the corner of this men's ward,
right?
Saying, "Lionel, we need you. Lionel, we need you to come in. Bill's hurt," and he heard me calling him from inside the building. And like I was hurt. So luckily he knew where we were. And so he come through the hall there and actually come and got me and said, "This has happened. What do you want to do?" So then I took a couple of investigators and we went into the building and we did a session in there, done some recordings and used different equipment. I think it might have been a spirit box or something. And we had something in there telling us, being threatening to us, telling us it was the beast and it was this and it was that. And, so it's a nasty little energy in there that for some reason I believe was trying to lure Lionel into this building on his own. So
do you think it would hurt him if it had got him in there?
I've seen it physically be physical. As I said, I was scratched, but I mean, there was one time when Lionel and I, excuse me, I got tongue twisted. Lionel and myself were in that building. We were doing some work. And everything changed. There was actually a wind in that building. Now, this building was closed off. There was put it this way, there was no windows open enough anywhere that would create a wind tunnel, which was happening in this building. And the funny thing is with this wind, when it was hitting us, for example, I think it was on my right-hand side. As I turned, the wind actually moved as well. So it sounds really strange. So it didn't matter which way I faced, the wind was hitting me from one side. It's like something was on that side. When we decided we were going to leave the building, we come out, we closed the door behind us. Now, behind the door, we sat down on this railing that's there, and Lionel's again lit up a cigarette, wow, that was pretty strange, pretty weird. As soon as we shut the door, Bud, and sat down, and within like 30 seconds, there was something behind the door actually hitting the door,
right?
Like it was trying to come out. So yeah, it's a very, very strange setup there.
Have you ever taken a medium in to try and communicate with whoever this is?
Sure. We have mediums that work with us, part of our team. They've gone in, they've picked up on things. There's for example, it's a men's ward, but the last 20 years or 25 years, they actually had women in there as well.
Right.
So because we were getting recordings, we were hearing women and things like that, and we were saying, well, this is unusual, it's a men's ward, but then when you research, you find out that there was women in there anyway. They've picked up on things, little things, and not a lot. This thing tends to hide quite well. The one thing we did have happen in there, and I thought, and it was probably, it was myself, we do a lot of experiments, different types of experiments in different locations. And I thought, we're going to see what happens here. So I set up a Gansfeld experiment, if you know what the Gansfeld experiment is, sensory deprivation. So I was the guinea pig. So we set up like a fold-up chair there. We sat there. I put all the the gear on, the earphones with we had a mixture of, I think we were experimenting with different types of noise. So we were using brown noise, I think, and it might be pink mixed. And the goggles with the light. And I've gone into this experiment, so I'm sitting there, and I've got film of this. This is being filmed, so I've got Lionel behind me, who's a medium as well. He works at that. I've got Amanda there doing stuff as well, sort of trying to keep some of this bad stuff, because there was a lot of negative energy. And Rick, who's our main medium, does looks after our mediums. He was behind me, sort of keeping this something back, and I could feel something trying to get around my throat. It's all, you don't know whether this is because it's sensory deprivation. You don't know whether it's imagination or whatever. So I was going with the flow. I was quite relaxed. But this film, you actually see Rick's arm it's like it's grabbed and then yanked backwards and lifts him off the ground about a foot and a half, trying to pull him through this doorway. So he's gone up, back about 6 feet, trying to be pulled into this doorway, and he's stopped himself, and he's hit the floor. He's gone up, come down, and stopped himself. And he's quite experienced. He's a very, very strong man. We use him on a lot. A lot of very bad cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see him turn around, and he actually, protects, pushes the energy away. But this film was like, it was. People would say, you could say he jumped, he did this, but if you look at the film, the direction and the way he's twisted, he couldn't have jumped that far. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's it's definitely there. There's something definitely in that part of the building.
Right. It'd be fascinating to find out why it's so aggressive.
It's again, I always say it's look at the environment. You're dealing with people who are not thinking straight.
Yeah.
They're not. Their mind is possibly not right, whether they were like that when they got there or whether they were like that, created like that because of the environment.
You can't really blame them.
You can't. You're locked up with a bunch of very aggressive people anyway in that part of the ward. And you if you were not insane, you probably would go insane, I would think.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I believe that a lot of these locations will attract negative energies anyway. So whether they're human spirit, or whether they're elemental, or whatever you want to call, if you go into the sort of realms, you might have something negative that's coming and feeds off that energy, and it could be affecting the way these other spirits work. So. That's all conjecture. So we're just thinking of different ideas.
Well, the thing is, that's the whole thing about the paranormal, isn't it? Everything is conjecture because nobody knows for sure.
Exactly.
So,
that's exactly.
But then again, in the men's ward, it's got the gangway that's nicknamed Suicide Bridge. So it's not exactly going to be the sort of happy-go-lucky, cheery, smiley sort of place.
Exactly. It's not really. I mean, they present that as you drive up to the building. If someone was being taken there, they'd come from Melbourne in a carriage and they'd be getting driven up, and the front building looks beautiful as you could look. But the facade of any of these locations is very different to what would go on inside. So, the outside looks beautiful. It's fantastic, lovely. Gardens are lovely, but really, it's a mental institution. You'd be in with people with all manner and levels of mental institutions through to mental problems, through to psychosis, through to whatever, and it must long term must affect you, and so you don't know what's once someone passes over what their mental state was, and you don't automatically change to a get wings and a halo when you pass away.
Yeah,
your mental state is I believe your mental state stays the same until you possibly receive some healing.
Okay.
But that's a different lecture again.
Okay. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. What you're saying about the mental health thing. Just because you've died doesn't mean that any problems that you had when you were living and breathing aren't going to stay with you. But it's kind of one of the conversations I have with people when you get the whole sort of demon thing, which does seem to be very popular. I don't know how popular that is in Australia, but it does seem to be in America. Is it? It seems to be America. Every American show is demons. Everything bad is demons. Whereas the UK investigators are more like, possibly not. It could just be a child. It doesn't have to be a demon masquerading as a child. And my whole take on it is that you get shitty people in life. Surely those shitty people in life are going to become shitty people in death. They're not going to suddenly become nice and sweet and, help the old lady across the road. They're still going to be nasty and want to play nasty jokes on you or pinch you or shove you or...
Exactly.
And that's my whole... And I do get into quite a lot of heated conversations with people who believe in demons.
I say the same thing, Penny. Just because you pass away, I would say, if someone's an SOB in life, son of a bitch, excuse the language.
I know an SOB. We use SOB in this country. Don't worry.
Yeah, they're going to be like that in death. And that might be one of the reasons they don't pass over, because they're fearing what they, maybe the judgment on the other side. I'm not sure, but they hang around.
Or they want to hang around to make havoc for people still, and they don't feel that their job is done. Yeah.
I mean. Demonic hauntings, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, Personally, I mean, I believe that there are demons. Right?
Right.
That's my personal belief because I've seen so much.
Yeah.
But it's not prevalent. It's not like they say.
Yeah.
It's not like they're, every case is demonic, which is with a lot of cases. I mean, I deal with we do a lot of private cases. We do a lot of very dark cases, where people are really being hassled. I've had cases. There's been groups here that have, proclaimed to be these demonologists and this and that, which is all, they're full of crap. Excuse the language. And I've been called by people that they've gone to. One lady in particular, for example, she contacted us in tears. I can't afford to move house. Well, why do you have to move house? Oh, these people come out and told me there's a demon there and I can't go back. I need to leave. I need to move.
Right.
And I had to say to her, look, wait, let me come and have a look. Let me come and have a chat to you. And I took Rick with me and, we went out there and we spoke to this lady and, she lived an alternative life. She was a Wiccan and, where she lived used to be an orchard. Mm-hmm. And there was a house 3 doors down, which was the owner's house. And, on a spirit level, everything was not that bad, and, because they were scared, of, and it's more fear of what they don't understand, what people, it's human nature. You fear what you don't understand, most people. These people coming there and saying what they said just built the fear. And, really so on a spiritual level, I'm not a medium as such, but Rick picked up that it was basically the owner of the orchard. He was quite a, religious, sort of straightforward man, and he didn't like the way they were living, so he was doing little things, you know what I mean? Yep. And that's all it was, you know what I mean? And Rick's a down-to-earth sort of bloke, he will sit there and, have a chat, and he's just a guy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He's an older man, he's been doing it for like 45 years, this, and, he calls it how it is, so... Mm-hmm. So we called bullshit, excuse the language, and we told her exactly what we thought it was, and she was fine after that and thanked us, and she was perfect. But you have people out there and everything's demonic, and and it's all it is to do is with ego.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of my colleagues at the radio show, he's a demonologist, but he doesn't believe that most things are demons. He's a demonologist from a scholar perspective, if that makes sense, from an educational perspective.
I understand. Yeah,
but he actually will say, well, no. I mean, because a friend of mine, she was convinced that if she did an investigation, she'd become possessed by a demon.
Okay.
And I said to her, I said, you can't. It's not really that. And I spoke to him about it, and I talked to her, and I said, you might get something latch onto you that likes you and wants to come with you. I said, that's happened to me before. I said, but in all honesty, and this is coming back to the shitty people thing I said earlier, how many people in life really are genuinely that obnoxious? Like, completely, you might not want to go out for a beer with all of them, but if one of them said hello to you in the street, you're not going to run in the opposite direction. You just wouldn't particularly want to be friends with them. Not the kind of people that would stab you or steal your husband or wife or whatever. Most people are genuinely okay. And,
I agree.
and this is what I said to her. I said, what makes you think that all spirits aren't genuinely okay? What you perceive, as you were just saying with this case, to be potentially demonic or evil, it's just them trying to go, hey, I'm here, I don't agree with this, will you please listen to me? And it's like that small child who is tugging on your leg going, oi, oi, and in the end you're going, whoa, you demon child, will you get out of my face? But they're just trying to get you to hear them. And
exactly.
And once you sort of say to someone, look, honestly, what they're doing, they're throwing stuff at you. Yeah, what would you do if you couldn't speak and you wanted to get someone's attention? Exactly. You'd move their stuff. You'd throw something. You'd bang the door so they have to look up.
Something. For sure.
It's a similar principle. It's not, and when I say this to people, they say, yeah, but it's scary. Well, ask them to stop then. Ask them what they want. Definitely. Ask them to talk to you. Ask them to explain.
Exactly. It is. Look, it is scary when you don't understand something. People get scared, and that's human nature. But to jump to the conclusion that there's a demonic entity trying to take you over or attack you or whatever, I mean, that's a big leap. That's a really big leap.
But it is a leap that a lot of people see, especially with a lot of the shows that come over from America. Exactly. They seem to think,
Oh, definitely. I mean, but then again, you're dealing with Hollywood, and you're dealing with, what people got to remember is these shows are entertainment.
Yeah.
They're not someone filming, I mean, these investigation shows, and I have a lot of respect for these guys because they put a lot of time in. I don't necessarily agree with some of the with their findings, but I mean I deal with a lot of these guys, and they spend a lot of time being very uncomfortable in some of these locations, for a week at a time, and to produce these shows, and it's entertainment. It's nothing more than that, and that's what people unfortunately mistake. These entertainment, or not just these movies, whatever, sci-fi, whatever, for reality. Yeah. And that's where the line blurs. People need to be able to say, hey, look, hey, I love to sit down and watch a horror movie, Annabelle or whatever. But, in reality, that's a Hollywood version of maybe that something happened, maybe something happened. And, they're going to tweak it up. They're going to tweak it up.
Artistic license,
exactly. I mean, you can't have a movie about an investigator sitting in a room for 4 hours with, sitting in the dark with recording, and then spending another, 10 hours trying to break down that recording. It just wouldn't, it's not going to sell.
Probably wouldn't sell. No, it wouldn't. Yeah. We talked about the men's ward though, and you say there's the beast in the men's ward who is a little bit aggressive and a bit argumentative, shall we say. What about the women's ward and Nurse Carey?
Nurse Carey, yes, she's still there taking care of the patients, I believe. I've seen photos that appear to show a nurse in there. I haven't captured them myself, but you do feel sometimes as a male in that area that you shouldn't be there. Right. And I think that's probably her. Probably her saying, "Well, this is the ladies, this is females. You shouldn't really be walking around here." And we've heard, or as an example, just recently I took a tour into the bottom floor of the women's ward. So what you've got is you've got the male ward, you've got the front of the building. If you're facing the building, which is admin, on the left-hand side running backwards is the male ward, and on the right-hand side running backwards is the female ward. So just recently I had a tour, and we have a few regular people, and one of them said, I haven't been in the female ward. I said, we'll go in there just to have a look. I wasn't running at that point. I wasn't going to do an investigation there. So I opened up, and we walked in, and walking around, and I said, I'm not sure. And I knew there was another tour because it's so big. They sometimes run 2 or 3 tours. And I knew there was another tour, but I thought I didn't know where they were. So we were in this building, and we could hear women laughing and sort of running around and carrying on. And I run an investigation tour. So I run it very similar to I'd run an investigation to give these people the experience of what a paranormal investigator does. The other tours are, that they do are sort of ghost tours. And, there are some investigation tours, but they're not run like us. And I thought, so they're having a giggle, they're having a laugh, good on them, And all right, so I left there and went back to the admin area. We were just finishing up. And I said, there was one of the guys ready to lock up. And I said, the other tour, where is it? Where are they now? It's just like 5 minutes after we've heard all this. And he says, oh, no, they're at the other end of the property in the morgue, which is like the furthest you can get from this building. There's no one in that building. Yeah. So the whole group heard women laughing, talking, carrying on. We thought it was another tour group, and there was no one else in that building. Interesting. So, yeah, they're still there, and I think Nurse Carey's there looking after them.
Okay. So what would you say the difference in feel for the two areas are, from the men's ward and the women's ward? What would you say the difference in the way they feel?
I think that the bottom floor of the men's ward is very aggressive. The top floor of the men's ward, not so much. It's more. For me, it's almost like sometimes a confusion. Or if you're trying to feel what they might have been feeling, to me, it's more like how would you say it? Confusion is probably the word at the moment. And the female ward is a top and bottom. I find quite active. You get quite a bit in there, but it's not aggressive.
Right.
Matter of fact, it's quite playful at times. I mean, there's a lot of stories I could tell you, but it's the females, I think, appreciate people being there. They enjoy it, whatever spirit's left there. I mean, the place is so active. One weekend we were there. We actually captured 87 Class A EVPs.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I had 6 investigators in the place, and and none of them were these voices. So we do all sorts of things to protect that.
Sure.
And we've got 87 Class A, and that's numerous Class B, Class C, etc. But Class A, clear as me and you speaking, 87.
So do you think the amount of activity that you get there, Bill, is because the spirits know you? It's because you go there so often. Because one of the other, we were talking about the shows on telly, and when you get new people coming on an investigation, they kind of expect your ghost adventures, your most haunteds, or whatever activity levels, and you try to explain to them: A, it takes time; B, the spirits aren't performing monkeys. You can't just click your fingers and get them to start, manifesting.
Exactly.
Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 visits to a place for them to even feel safe to talk to you or to interact with. And these are the intelligent spirits. I don't mean so much residual stuff. I mean the interactive ones.
The intelligent ones. I agree. And, if they are intelligent, you're dealing with people that, that had mental issues, so that it takes time for them to build trust as well. They have fear themselves, And I do explain at the start that you may experience something, you may not. I mean, we can't. Same as you said, they're not trained monkeys. I say I can't make them perform on cue.
Yeah.
We've had investigations where there's been nothing. I mean, in the whole place, but I've had other ones where we've been the only people in. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's one of those things, I mean, it's how they feel on the day, how their spirits obviously want, whether they want to interact, they could be affected by the people in the group. If they're a bit skeptical, being a bit silly, they might think, well, we're not going to waste our time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As an example, I'm just, running thoughts.
Yeah.
It could be to do with, the environment. If it's a full moon, it might be more active. If it's stormy weather, again, could be more active, because of the electricity in the air. It depends on everything, not just at Aradale, at any location, and I believe I explain that to them, that depending on, we can't guarantee you're going to experience anything, but most of the time, because you're out there, with these clients who might not have had any sort of experience as paranormal, you're giving them equipment. I've seen people just be fascinated by. I handed one guy an Ovilus, and the whole night he wouldn't let that Ovilus go. He was walking around with it, and sort of standing in the corner watching these words, and not even looking at the environment or what he's,
Yeah.
So
I'm like that with my spirit box when it starts getting stuff coming through. I'm like, if anyone says, "Can they borrow it?" No, it's mine. It's staying with me. Right. I love my spirit box when it's working. Yeah.
Mate, when they start spitting out, I mean, we have a bunch of different ITC stuff that we use, and when they start going off, people are fascinated. Like, wow, we do a thing in the staff quarters nearly every time, and it works. Because Amanda doesn't get down to the tours that often because of personal commitments here and that, and other gigs we have, and she, I always say, can you tell me my wife's name? And they tend to be a bit stubborn with me sometimes. I'll get someone else to ask, can you say Bill's wife's name? And 99% of the time it'll say Amanda. They'll say the name. You know what I mean? So you're dealing with intelligent spirits. And I mean, it sounds like we're trying to get them to perform tricks, but it's more verification. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like trying to if you're doing EVP work or ITC work, asking them to say something to like a code word almost, you know what I mean? If you're here, can you say monkey, and trying to get that, and that way if they do say monkey, you've got to maybe
like, what colour shoes have I got on? How many people are in the room? All this kind of thing it's quantifiable.
Exactly. Trying to ask something that they can, if they can say it, then it, it gives you an idea that they are there. You know what I mean? So,
fascinating. So, just before we go, what has been your favourite experience at Aradale?
Oh, wow. There's been many, but just recently I was in. There's just outside the actual compound itself. There's the forensic building. And we take people there, and that's where we mentioned when we were speaking before about Gary Webb, who was a bit of a psychopath. He's a a bit of a scoundrel, that sort of thing. Well, we always go in there and we go to the cell that they made for him and we do some work there. But as I was coming out, I had the group. I had one lady with me. I opened the front door of this building. There was a short, stout man standing there in an old woolen uniform, which was what they used to wear. And for 2-3 seconds, looked at us. He was as confused as we were, and then he just vanished, just took off.
Wow,
that was probably the most recent that was. And I thought if it was just myself, maybe I'm tired. Maybe it's been a long night or whatever. But there was this lady, and I looked at her and she said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yep." Thank you very much.
Wow.
But so that's really interesting. We do get things like that all the time.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was probably the most recent one. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Well,
anytime,
the morning for you, nearly your lunchtime, isn't it? I suppose in Australia.
Yeah, it's about 11:45. Yep.
Yeah, it's 1:45 in the morning for me here. So,
but
I actually went to sleep this afternoon, so I'd be able to stay awake to do this. But thank you so much for your time, Bill. I really, really appreciate it. If anyone wants to go and find Bill, his group is called Australian Paranormal Society. They're on Facebook. You can't miss them. Go and give them a like, and then you can follow the investigations and everything else they're doing over there in Australia. All that leaves me to say is thank you so much for listening to Haunted Histories on Parasearch Radio. We have got shows on every night of the week, and you can go and catch up on them if you miss them on both Spreaker and on YouTube. If you want to send us a message, please feel free to do so through our Facebook pages. But on that note, do have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.